share some of it with you. My hometown, Douglas, Massachusetts, used to be called New Shorburn. And a Dr. Douglas came in and offered big things to the town if they would name the town after him. So they did. Not all of his promises came to fruition, but, you know. The town grew thanks to being on the river and allowing for businesses like mills to pop up. The very first one was the axe mill. Now, later on, the axe mill was bought out by American Axe out of Pennsylvania, and it was moved to Pennsylvania. They thought the town would just go after that. But at the time that the axe mill was going out, a couple of entrepreneurs showed up. One guy from the neighboring town of Uxbridge and one guy from way out in Western Mass in the town of Pittsfield came in and opened their woolen mills. Their names were Hayward and Schuster. William Hayward came in and opened his mill, and not too long after, Walter Schuster showed up. They worked together, and in 1908, the mill that my father worked at, the Hayward Schuster Mill, was built and opened. Because the demand was so great for their products that they needed the second mill. It is... can't tell if it's actually raining or not. I would sure like to go do what I was asked to do. And I can take you with me, actually. Let me look out the door. Actually, it was Winfield. I'm sorry. Yeah, Walter and Winfield Schuster came to Douglas. They were brothers and partnered with Mr. Hayward. Like I said, the Schuster Mill was built in 2004. On Gilbo Street, again, because of the demand. They were making men's suits, and the quality was so great that their suits were sought after nationwide. During both World Wars, or at some point, I think around World War I, they became a government contractor, making blankets for the United States Army. Wool blankets. And part of being a government contractor for something like that is the government will literally come in and measure those blankets. They were, well after the wars, they were still contracted to make those blankets. And my mother, at the time that she worked there, which wasn't for very long, she remembers the government coming in and measuring those blankets. And if those blankets weren't perfect to the size specifications they wanted, they wouldn't take that blanket. So, as a result, there were a few extra blankets hanging around, and so we had a few blankets. Eventually, the government contract went away, but the one thing that didn't go away was the fencing, the guard shack, because they were a government contractor. I never knew why they had all that. My mother asked me one day, do you know why they have the fence and the guard shack? And I said, no. She said, because they were a government contractor. It was required. And I'm thinking to myself, there's no government secrets there. You want to steal an army blanket? You really don't have to, because they used to give them away to employees. We had a ton of them. Probably the ones that were off by a millimeter to the military specifications or whatever, but we had a lot of them. They kept us very warm in the winter, I assure you. And we also had remnants later on when it became, well, it became Guilford Industries, which still made wool. Don't think, well, they made woolen products for LL Bean, stuff like that. And eventually it became Interface Interior Fabrics. And they made fabric wall coverings for fancy schmancy office buildings and stuff like that. Still with the wool, because all their machines were made to work with wool. In fact, in the beginning, all the way up through the 1970s, because my father remembered this, they had sheep on the property. Actual sheep. If you can imagine. So, we also had a washing machine patented in May 3rd of 1870 by Mr. Bean, I didn't make that up, and a Mr. Logie. And there was an ice cream shop called Abel, Abell, that delivered ice cream around town for free on Thanksgiving Day. And they talked about the beginning of the Goodness Store. The Wellman Grist Mill is still standing, and it was capable of storing 60 tons of grain. We had, sadly, a Douglas Poor Farm, which is now Downs Farm. There was an ice house on the lake with a boarding house for the men who worked at the ice house. It was sent by rail to Providence and was eventually bought by the Providence Ice Company. All of the stones that you see around town, the stones between metal chains at the churches and cemeteries, were all quarried right here in town and in Uxbridge. Also, the stones that built the axe mill, all of those stones were quarried right here, which is kind of a neat thing. You don't see that every day. I tried to find the Poor Farm. I found nothing. William Hayward opened his mill in 1880. By the way. And the axe mill went to the Paris Exposition in 1870-something, 73 or 74, and built this amazing display out of nothing but axe heads. They had made it, then they had to disassemble it, put it in crates, put it on a ship, send it to Paris with a couple of guys to reassemble it at the exposition. And they won awards there and in London for having some of the finest axes in the world. So, what an honor for our little town. The grinders at the axe mill would have grinders consumption, which was lung disease because of the grinding dust. And I want to tell you a quick story. Did I write it down? Okay, yes. You can see the grindstones, and I've shown them to you all over town in other videos from the mill, as downtown, as decorations. A 500-pound grindstone, they could burst apart, explode during use from the friction and the spinning and stuff. And there is a story of a 500-pound grindstone, as the guy was using it to hone the blade, to make the blade on the tool that he was making, because it wasn't just axes, it was axes and adzes and scythes and all sort of different tools like that. And he was going about his business. All of a sudden the thing burst apart. A huge chunk of it went up through the roof. Another huge chunk smashed a piece of machinery. I mean, all I could think of was the words, "Run for your life," because that's all you could do. I mean, the poor guy sitting there, when the thing goes blammo, must have run for his life and said a few words that I won't repeat. I'm sure there were a few people saying a few colorful words in the shop that day. And whoever was working on the machinery that it hit, I'm sure, ran for their lives too. So, yeah, they got an unexpected skylight and smashed machinery. So, but I guess sometimes they would burst. That must go all over town when that happens. First of all, they must hear it all over town, or must have heard it all over town. But also, it must have gone all over town on the like the rumor mill, so to speak. Because that's how news traveled back then. It was person to person, And so I can imagine. So, and the reason that these mills were able to thrive here was the river. The Mumford River, which is a tributary of the Blackstone. It all goes back into the Blackstone. There's the Mumford and there's another river, and I didn't write down the name, but Lori did tell us. And they all go into the Blackstone River. That's why this area of Massachusetts is called the Blackstone River Valley, or the Blackstone Valley. Because we are a valley on a river. We have several river valleys here. We have the Merrimack River Valley, was it the Scituate? Can't remember. But there's another one. Hey guys, welcome to Punky's World. Okay, I wanted to give you a history of my town, and I ended up going and taking pictures, so I wanted to share those with you. I remember when my father said fabric wall coverings, I'm thinking, huh? And he sort of explained it to me. There are these panels that are covered in fabric. And you will see them, in fancier places. And, but yeah, that's one of the things that they did. Well, that's what Interface did. So, fortunately, they didn't have to change the machinery any, because I think it was still made of wool. And it was so funny. My father would come home and we'd go, we'd pick a piece of wool fluff off him and look at it and say, "Oh, you were working with red today, Dad. Green today, Dad? Blue today?" Whatever color they were dyeing was usually somewhere on his flannel shirt in the form of tufts of wool. That was an ongoing joke in our family. That and his steel-toed boots. My father was very well trusted. He was given responsibilities beyond his job. Like, he would pick up the bigwigs at the airport when they came in from Maine. And I think he picked up bigwigs for Interface, too, when they came in. Like, there were bigwigs that came in from Japan. I believe he picked them up at the airport as well. That became part of his job, you know. And he would just be rolling his eyes. "I gotta pick up the bigwigs tomorrow." For him, it wasn't a big deal, A lot of people would have been like, "Oh, geez, I got to pick up the bigwigs." My father wasn't nervous. He just thought it was funny, ridiculous. But he had the right personality because he was quiet, but he also had a wonderful sense of humor. So he would, like I said, he would pick up the bigwigs, and they used to send him to Maine for different things. He did a whole physical training thing that they went somewhere to do. He learned first aid and CPR, and had those certifications. He just was amazing. And the opportunities he had were amazing. And I think that is something that we've lost today, in the sense that today we want everybody to have a high school education, or better yet, a college education, to get into a simple job. My father had a education into part of 9th grade. Well, probably 3/4 of 9th grade, because he turned 16 in April and quit to go to work to take care of his mother and his little brothers. And you know what? His father certainly wasn't doing it, although his father was probably old enough to retire at that point. Let's see. Close. Because my grandfather was almost 44 when my father was born. So 54 when he was 10. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. He was like 60 years old. So even if he could have made a living, he couldn't. My grandfather's arthritis wouldn't have allowed it, especially at that point. And, of course, it didn't help that my grandfather liked to imbibe. So, and getting that job, I mean, he worked other jobs before that, but getting that job in the 70s, my father started out as a painter. And he traveled a lot as a steeplejack, and he said, "You know what, I don't want to do this with a baby. So I'm going to get another job." And he got his job at the mill and worked there, like I said, my entire life. And my entire childhood, my entire 20s, that's what he did. And was afforded opportunities that I think are missed today, just based on his work ethic and his consistency and reliability, trustworthiness, things that are much more important, and of course his experience later on, things that were much more important than his education or lack thereof. We so miss that today. And so I want to show you some of the pictures that I took today, which is why I decided to remake the video. Well, that didn't work out very well. Hold on. Ah! Okay, anyway. I didn't get that picture right. Ah, come on. All right. Let me grab. I want to show you the loom. This thing is amazing. Look at the size of that thing. I have two pictures of it. That's one side of it. Here's the other side of it. Uh-oh. Come on. That thing is huge. I don't know if you can tell by looking at it. And this was their newsletter. It's called The Loom Fixer. So, that's pretty cool. And I need to keep trying to get a hold of Hayward Landing to get permission to use those pictures. But thank you guys so much. God bless you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Oh.